morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This session is on team chat tools for collaboration. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Rebecca Mushter. I'm a faculty member in graphic design and interaction design, and also the associate director of CELT. And I'm super excited that Soma's here to join me. And Soma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Soma Meishung Fraser, and I'm a nerdy professor in English and creative writing.
So Soma and I were in a meeting together at one point earlier this semester and discovered we were both using some chat tools in our classes, and I thought it might be helpful to have a session on kind of what these tools are and how they can be helpful for certain kinds of work. So the objectives for today are to explore kind of what team chat tools are, how they can be used, how they're different than discussion boards, which you might be more familiar with for online learning. We're going to review two case studies, my use of Slack in my classes and Soma's use of Discord. And then we'll give you a hands-on opportunity to try both platforms and get some help and ask questions. So there are a lot of different chat kind of tools available. We're going to focus on Slack and Discord and really give you some insight into what those are in a great detail. But I do also want to mention that there are a couple other platforms you might want to think about as possibilities. One is Google Chat, which has a lot in common with Slack. It's not quite as robust as Slack, but it has a lot of the same features. And then we also have that new platform that we're rolling out as a pilot program on campus called Circle In, where students can have a lot of these features available to them and kind of self-form groups and things and chat amongst themselves, but not with us, right? So it's a way that some of these things might be able to happen in a different platform, but one that maybe as a faculty member or staff member, you wouldn't have as full control over. Slack is largely out of it's used a lot in technology industries, design industries for collaborative work for both asynchronous and synchronous communication. Soma, do you want to share just a little overview of Discord?
Yeah, so Discord actually had a different origin. It began as the #1 communication platform for gamers. So their initial tagline was something like, "It's time to ditch Skype and TeamSpeak." But they were referring to, folks who were playing games together. Then when the company decided that they wanted to broaden, they tried to do things like sell games for a while, but they found they couldn't compete with Steam. So instead they targeted education and animation studios, workplaces where people were probably already a little bit familiar with the types of dashboard and functions that they had. So now their new tagline is "Your place to talk," and it's robust in certain ways. As a conversational hub, Discord is great because it was built for folks who wanted to feel like they were sitting on the same ratty couch, playing a game. But it's definitely not anything that's trying to compete with an LMS, and I'm not sure how many workplaces will pick it up. It's used as a virtual lounge for my students, as you'll see.
So these platforms have the ability for both kind of real-time and asynchronous communication, and that's one of their strengths, I think. There is the ability to kind of chat, like instant messaging, right? Or direct messages. On the left, you can see a screenshot of the mobile app for Slack and what the kind of communication looks like in terms of chat. You can see that there's strong use of emojis. You can kind of respond to someone's post with emojis. You can also include emojis and things. There's also the ability to mention people who are in the group to, specifically give them alert or something like that.
Similarly, you can tag folks with the @ in Discord, and there is voice, there's video. The voice and video chat rooms accommodate up to 50 viewers, but you can only do video chatting for 25. And free users can stream 30 FPs. You can get more if you want. So it's usually not laggy. And you can also DM and PM people. And within your DMs, you can also screen share and video chat.
Which I think that's an important differentiation between the two platforms. The free version of Slack has one-on-one like video and voice calling, but it also has some nice integrations with Zoom. And that's one of the differences too, is that Slack is like a real like workplace platform and has a lot of integrations. So they don't have really, they do at like a high level, if you like pay for a Slack account, you can have all the same kind of like voice and chat kind of in it, but I largely use the text-based chatting and I use Zoom for kind of the audio video.
Yeah, and Discord's integrations are few and far between. They're mostly for social media and gaming apps. So the one thing you could probably do with the integrations is find all your contacts.
So one thing that they have in common is that they're both cross-platform, and Google Chat fits into this category as well. So does Circlin, actually, that they have like kind of apps for mobile devices, no matter kind of what your mobile device is. There's also browser access, and there is both Windows and Apple applications that you can install on your desktop. So what you can see up on the screen right now is on the right, we have Slack's desktop application. Where you see kind of on the far left of that is the different workspaces a person might be a part of. What's the next column over? So kind of the second column from the left is a column of all of the different channels and communication that's happening within a particular workspace. And then this is within one of those channels, that kind of conversation that's occurring.
You'll see that Discord's setup is very similar. Discord does have unlimited file storage, but the file size limit is 8 megabytes in the free plan. So it's meant for like simple reaction GIFs and communication rather than, sharing your greatest film masterpiece that you've just videotaped with your iPhone.
Yeah, if you're doing a lot of file sharing and stuff, Slack is a good option because it supports all kinds of file types. It even has previews for like Adobe product kind of images and things. So we can share a Photoshop file and actually get a quick preview, which is really helpful in the kinds of classes I teach. So here's a little example of some of the sharing. This is a screenshot from Slack. And you can see that you can easily share screenshots. There's also previews of URLs. So if you were to post a URL, it gives you a quick preview image as well as a quick little summary. You can share audio, video, images, and files, and there's good integration with Google Drive.
Yeah, Discord has some similar things. Because it was created for gamers, there are also some levels of security. You can have it, go into safe mode and make sure that no one is going to DM you NSFW, not safe for work DMs, or you can set it so only your friends are not screened by the Discord censor robot, or you can just play it unsafe. However, for teachers, it is safe to just leave those security permissions rather low, because you're only going to be inviting into your space students who hopefully aren't going to be sending you any NSFW materials.
And if they are, we've got a whole different set of problems. So emojis and things are something that makes these spaces great. And so I hope what you're starting to hear about these spaces, that this is more of an informal space for communication and a place to formulate community. So one of my desires was to allow my students to collaborate on projects, have a place for teams, but also a place where I could coach those teams, right? And act kind of as a creative director on those. I wanted it to feel like we were in a classroom together and have that informal conversation and chatter that we would if we were in person. And Slack was something I used also when we were in person way back when as well. So at that point, it was a supplement. Now it's like a main way we communicate. I just found that discussion boards did not work for the real-time communication we really needed to have kind of in class and outside of class while we were working on projects. And it just felt so sterile in a way that just didn't support the kind of work we wanted to do in my classes.
Yeah, I actually didn't adopt Discord until October in the fall semester, because in the spring I had, thought that I was teaching in triage mode when we suddenly shifted online. So in the fall, I had prepared Blackboard, and Blackboard, as you know, has quite a few bells and whistles. And I had Zoom calls that were optional for my asynchronous students, and they were coming, but still the chance for them to interact as they would in the cafeteria, before class, after class, meet up and work on a group project, those types of things, those were lacking. And so I wanted them to be able to bond. So like Rebecca, I really appreciated the fact that you can create like your own emojis, make animated emojis, and use bots. If you want to create bots, Discord even has some website where they rate the bots with the most followers. So yes.
Along those same lines, the ability to create emojis works really great in some environments. And that was one of our kind of icebreaker things at the beginning of the semester to formulate community. And in fact, you can see right here, the fifth one over in the top row is the Rebecca happy emoji designed by school.
Fabulous.
And I'm very disappointed to say I've been contemplating using Google Chat this semester just so students don't have to make separate accounts. And they don't have custom emojis, so that might be a deal breaker.
Maybe soon.
So some of the things you might want to consider when you're looking at one of the options for use for within your team, whether it's in a classroom setting or not, are things like message limits. So for example, the free account for Slack has 10,000 messages before you tap out. That has only happened one time. And it was when I had a class that was collaborating with Allison Rank's class and when we were working on Vote Oswego. So we were doing a lot of like immediate kind of conversations back and forth across classes and stuff. And we did breach the 10,000 messages.
Discord is unlimited on messages,
which is important to know. You also have a kind of number of users that you want to think about. Slack really doesn't have any limitations in that realm, not for any kind of scope that we're going to need to worry about for our purposes.
Probably that you won't bump up against Discord's limit, but it does have one no more than 5,000 concurrent users.
You also want to think about integrations and whether or not it's something that you need, right? So Slack has thousands of integrations. I also combined some of my integrations with a tool called Zapier. So I automated some things. So I automated some reminders and things like that using that other tool. And I could do that because there were so many integrations available.
And again, Discord has very few, just mostly for uploading your contacts list from some kind of social media site.
Let's see. Jeff, that's a good question for when you reach 10,000 messages. Does it just delete or lock the oldest ones? It doesn't actually get rid of them. It does store it. You just don't have access to it and you can't search them anymore. So if you were to pay for an upgrade, you could gain access to those. And actually for our Vote Oswego class, we do some research related to that, and we did pay to like be able to get our archives so that we could analyze some of the data that we had in there. So it's always an option. Logins are a bit different between these two platforms as well. And I think it's also worth mentioning the Google Chat here, just because with our Google campus, Google Chat doesn't require an extra login. So that's an important thing to note. Slack does require setting up an account. And one of the kind of weird things about Slack, but it's largely because it is present in like the business world and with like client projects and stuff, is that each workspace has its own login. You can see them all and easily swap between those workspaces, but they actually have their own individual logins, which can be a little annoying.
Well, on the flip side, Discord has one login, which is convenient most of the time. But as you'll see for my case study, my students wanted a distinct and separate server because in addition to one login, there are a lot of teachers who will put all of their classes in one server. And that means that basically there's a virtual space where you're bumping into a bunch of people. So you can create as many servers as you want, I believe. I should look that up. But you know, they're still all in one login place.
Yeah, and I always make a separate workspace for each class in each semester. For a while, I actually had my web design students. I would have multiple like generations of web students in the same space, and it was great because alumni would actually come back and chat with my students. But at some point, it just became like an organizational nightmare, and I definitely keep to a single one per class. I don't close them on students though, so if they want to continue using them, they can. Um, Slack also offers threaded discussions. However, you can only go one layer deep, right? Like you can't have like threads inside of threads, which was an important discovery I made when I started heavily using Slack this past semester for discussion and stuff, because I had to restructure how I did discussion, because I couldn't have, threads inside of threads essentially.
That is better than Discord, where there are no threads. I had all our online discussions that were complicated housed in Blackboard when I discovered this.
Yeah. One nice feature Google Chat does have the ability to kind of set up some different threads, but again, only one layer deep of threads, just to be aware of. You also want to know that there are different roles and permissions you can set for users in these spaces. So there's kind of admin, like you can set up the whole space kind of privileges and allow who can join and who can't join kind of privileges. And then there's some different kinds of additional privileges within. So there's kind of a regular user role. There's like visitor roles. And then there's one that's like not quite admin level that I use for my TA, so they can edit and delete and do some management of the space, but not like change how the space is structured.
Yeah, I really like the way that Discord allows you to allocate permissions to roles, because it's set up for gamers. You can also change the names for roles. So instead of like admin, you could have demigods, and the demigods could be able to, for instance, change everyone's nickname or kick people out or ban them permanently. The types of things that you would probably want to reserve for yourself. And then for a TA, you can do things like have the TA be able to, in video chat, just start speaking and everyone else is instantly, their volume is lowered, those types of things. So you name the roles and create the hierarchy and set the permissions.
Yeah, and there's some, I'm pretty generous with permissions with my students. They often have a lot more power than they realize they have, which is probably good. But I do nudge them to, to discover they have some power. So in Slack, there are like these little like startup messages when you like launch the app, like little quotes and stuff. And I allow anybody to make those. They don't necessarily know that they can do that, but it's kind of fun when you get one by surprise. I let them make their own custom emojis and things like that. So there's some ability there that you can open up and have some fun and allow them to kind of own the space a little. And then there are templates available not in Slack. So I'll let someone talk about that.
Discord's got a template library, including an education template. So the link that I popped into the chat will take you to something where you can join Discord and then create a server based on a template. You'll have a server basically within under a minute.
I just re-added it to the chat for those that joined after.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So here are some words of advice based on her experience. One is get students using it immediately so it becomes a habit of being in that space. Like on the first day, do something that gets them in that space. I actually have students like chatting during class and stuff in Slack as well as in Zoom, right up front.
Yes, I noticed that the ones who, I usually close out the servers after a couple of months after the semester ends, and I noticed that the ones who have been in a Discord room from the beginning when I've used it in the past are still sometimes, floating in and out of the rooms, but the ones where, like with last semester when I started a bit late, only the small groups are still active in the rooms. The classrooms are now deserted. So yeah, get them in there.
I think the other thing that I discovered, and it's not really that surprising, is that these are applications that like by default have like a bazillion notifications turned on. which is really good to keep turned on in the beginning because it gets students in that space like frequently, right? And if they have it, I encourage my students to install the app on their phones and things so that they stay connected. However, by the end of the semester, students were like, I've really had enough of Slack. Like, I hate Slack, it's too much. But I actually think it's because they didn't take the time to customize their notifications. So one of the things that I'm definitely, and in conversation with my TAs, I also, we decided maybe week 3 after you kind of have a habit, then we can tell you how to customize it once you find some things to be annoying, or what your own habits are going to be like and whether or not you need to be pinged to kind of get those reminders, or if you're going to just make a habit of checking in on these spaces. So, you can have stuff like send you emails, which I've totally turned off. Nobody wants that many more emails in their lives, I don't think. But, you can customize quite a bit.
Yeah, that could be a nice early assignment too, is like fiddle around with your customization of notifications.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other, Slack has a lot of other customizations too. Like you can change the font size and some other defaults that I think students and people may not even realize they have access to if you don't kind of poke around a little bit. The other thing to note is that although these are digital spaces that seem familiar and aren't totally difficult to learn, right? Like they're similar to chat applications that a lot of students have experience with. You really want to provide tutorials and references and activities to kind of get started, because they don't necessarily get it, or they don't get how you're going to use it, because they might get how to use it in their social life, but not how to get it as a function of their class, or a way to communicate or collaborate, and some of the strategies you might need to use around it. So for example, when I was sending messages out, and I needed to know whether or not students were getting them, one of the things that we tend to use in a Slack space professionally are using emojis to acknowledge receipt of information, right? Yep, got it. And so, we talked about that in class, and that was important, that if someone in your team sent you information or whatever, you needed to at least acknowledge that you received that information, especially if they needed to depend on something. So, there's some of those customs that aren't going to be obvious to them unless you reveal them.
Yeah, and you can also, along those lines, give them examples of how they might use it. For instance, in my poetry class, I had an asynchronous poetry class that many of the students couldn't attend the optional Friday Zoom reading for. So this is where the students get together and read their poetry out loud to one another, which gives a very different feeling than seeing a video. So the students created, used the Discord room to have their own impromptu poetry readings. They would just say, let's meet on Wednesday or whatever, 2 students to 10 students, depending. But I don't know that they would have thought of that if I hadn't suggested it. So you can suggest different ways they might utilize it.
And nudge them, make some of them requirements early on.
Yeah.
Sometimes that helps. And likewise, setting ground rules for how to use this space, and making sure that if it's good with you, or the purpose of using it is for informal communication, you tell them this is informal. I'm going to talk informally. You can talk informally. This is a place where we talk informally. Likewise, there are also boundaries, right? This is somewhat of a professional space, so there are certain things that aren't appropriate here. We did set up in my classes separate channels for kind of random discussions that had nothing to do with class, and that's a place where things could be more personal, but also that everyone had access to everything in that space, and to remember that.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. We had an off-topic channel, and I loved looking at it just because, as you'll see in the case study, it has pictures of pets in it, but also there is that need for chatter that we all feel when we go to a conference too. But if you can put it in a certain place, then it keeps it distinct and it doesn't interfere with the actual work at hand.
And you definitely want to think about kind of roles and permissions as you set things up, which I think we talked about, right? So in terms of Slack, I use these mostly in project-based classes. So classes where they might be working on a long-term project in a small group often, or where there's a lot of technical stuff and there's a lot of need for help and support. So I use Slack primarily for kind of general class announcements, because I didn't want them to go to 5 spaces, right? I wholly embrace Slack as our primary asynchronous platform, So although I use Blackboard for grades and stuff and assignments were available there, I posted all of that same information in Slack to make life easier and to keep them there. I kept class discussions there. Our team discussions were there. Kind of on-demand help was there from peers, TAs, and from me, and kind of the ability to build community. To be really specific, and I'll show you an example in a minute, I created different channels for different teams. So each small group had their own channel, which is basically like their own place for chatting. And I was in each of those spaces, and so was my TA. So we could intervene, help, coach, see where people were getting stuck. In those channels, I had students do what's called a daily huddle, which is an agile way of working where you kind of indicate to your team what you've done since the last time you met, what you're planning to do between now and the next time you meet, and what we might be stuck on, as a way to make sure that everyone in the team knew where everybody was at in the process. And I also kind of started helping the teams bond with each other by making a custom emoji for Slack and having to upload it and giving them no instructions other than they needed to do that and figure out how. And they had to work together to do that. I also had separate channels for help, announcements. We had one for inspiration and kind of some social chatter, which was in a different space. We had weekly discussions, which had their own space. And I shared course materials and things like that and reminded people of upcoming deadlines. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a moment. And hopefully I didn't totally lose it, because that sometimes happens. And I'm going to share my Slack space with you. So this was my web space. I'm currently just sharing the general channel, which is primarily where I provided announcements. So you're not seeing as much discussion, just to protect kind of the privacy of students who are in this space. But you can see that you can easily, add emojis. You can see that students were reacting and responding to things. I could embed little links to Zoom because I had it integrated, as well as, I think up here, there's some files that you could easily get access to. Over here, you can see channels that I made. I teach stack classes, so 300, 400, 500 level in the same place. So I gave them their own spaces to talk, but we also had a shared space. I had critique groups that had their own spaces. These other ones that have weird names, those are teams, and they self-name their teams. And you'll notice that I have them all set to be public because I wanted the design process to be visible as part of the learning experience. It's possible to make private channels and things too, but the group channels were not private. Students have the rights to make their own separate channels as well. And then there's also the ability to direct message and things like that. And then over here, you can see that I'm also a member of many other Slack workspaces, and you can easily kind of switch between them by just tapping. So I'm gonna get back to our presentation here. Can everyone see the slides? Did I do that okay? All right. Awesome. I'll pass it to Selma.
Okay, so yeah, Discord for me was mostly about community building. As I said, I felt like the students didn't really interact with one another as much in Blackboard. It's not super easy and flexible. It has many of the same features as Slack. And the good thing is that I don't have to teach you how to build them, because there is that link that will help you build a Discord server for a teacher, specifically for a teacher, in a minute. So yeah, it's super easy if you want to try it out. Might you hit play on that video? Let's create a Discord server in 1 minute flat. I'm pasting in the link that I put into our Zoom chat, which takes us here. An account, I'll use my subnivian@gmail.com email, Prof. Fraser as my name, password that I can try and remember despite my birthday, May 2nd of 73, being so long ago. Continue. Yeah, create a server. And we're done. Since our new server has terrific built-in channels, we might next let Discord walk us through inviting friends, giving our server an icon, sending our first message, and downloading the app should you wish. I use web-based. Then we'd use this pull-down menu to start establishing roles and rules for our new virtual space. So clearly I cheated because I was like, can I do it in 1 minute if I'm doing it on the fly? I also cheated in an abundance of caution around FERPA. I created a video for my case study because I wanted to black out the student names and anything that I thought might be sensitive. So here it is. So I'll share how I use Discord for my project-based digital storytelling class in the fall. The class was offered asynchronously online, and students participated in a group project called Subnivian. Subnivian is an international publication that I created to provide my students with a first-hand, behind-the-curtains look at the publishing industry. We read a lot of manuscripts, some, like this one by U.S. Poet Laureate Emeritus Juan Felipe Herrera, are quite short, but others are very long. In 3 months' time, Subnivian received more than 520 manuscripts from authors working in the US and beyond. The students, too, were spread from New York to Arizona and further, precluding traditional staff meetings in a cafe, classroom, or other on-campus space. So for this case study, I'll share a brief tour of the Subnivian editorial team's virtual lounge. If you think of Discord as a community of distinct virtual spaces, and of our class Discord server as one virtual space in which to hang out, hopping easily from discussion to discussion, text channels to voice or video chat, it makes sense that some groups may want their own dedicated space. So we agreed that our student editor-in-chief, Athena, would create a Discord server as a private lounge for Subnivian's editors only. Here's my Discord homepage. Now, I know I'm on my homepage because if you look at the top left corner, there's a little white bar indicating where I am, and it's next to the very top icon, which is always a user's homepage. Easter egg, click on that little purple and white icon 15 times rapidly, and a Japanese robot says, Discord. Anyway, underneath the homepage icon are the servers I'm a member of, and below them a little green plus sign that lets you create a new server by using a template or building from scratch. Easy breezy. And you'll have time to do just that toward the end of our session today with a link to some simple instructions for educators, including a template that I'll share in our Zoom chat. First, though, a tour of this lounge. It was built from a Discord template called Study Group. See that little white bar? It indicates that we're now in the Subnivian staff server. Numbers all appear on the right-hand side of the screen, names redacted. If this were your server and the names weren't redacted, you could click on one and send a private message. But instead, just to give you a sense of how the students used their virtual lounge, let's walk down the list of channels on the left-hand side of your screen. So, starting with the topmost category, Information, the highlighted white channel is the one we're in. Welcome and Rules, while the other channels are grayed out. Here, Athena's created a very simple greeting instructing students to head over to the Introductions channel and introduce themselves. Moving down the list, we're in the Announcements channel, and as you can see, there's a hashtag preceding its name. Students can also use channels' hashtags to link them within comments, and the @ symbol is also used intuitively, as in social media, to tag people, directing a comment toward that specific member. Here, the student who shared the announcement about Subnivian's new Facebook page with the other staffers has not just publicly posted his comment, but also tagged everyone to notify all users with a ping that they've got an announcement, even if they're offline. Moving on down the channels list, out of the information category to the text channels category, and you can set these categories yourself, we see that chatter of introductions appears in the center of our screen. And it's the same for general. Here you can see some students have decided that they want to speak face-to-face about some manuscripts, maybe go to bat for a story or poem that they like, and they're arranging a time to pop into the video chat. Off topic, we've got a very cute pug as well as an axolotl named Flapjack. In fiction, there's a discussion of the process we'll use to narrow down our selections and determine what eventually really makes it into the issue and what doesn't. And here in the poetry editor's conversation, you can see a chat about the merits or non-merits of a manuscript consisting entirely of Trump's tweets with certain words blacked out to form poetry. Arriving at the final item in that left-hand channel list, the voice chat, you can see I've entered the voice and video chat center down at the bottom left of the screen. Now, the semester's over, there's nobody here, but were I just popping in, I might find two people chatting. Or if I had a scheduled meeting with other editors, I could also meet them here with the option to turn my video on or off, to share my screen, to mute myself, or to deafen the conversation, while still being able to, listen to conversations in other Discord rooms, watch a video on my screen, or simply listen to music. And if you look up in the right-hand corner of the screen, you can see that one of my students is actually using Discord and has noted what music he's listening to. So that's how I used Discord in my project-based class, and now it's your turn to play around with Discord or Slack. So, yeah.
I think if there's any quick questions, we can take those. I knew that was going to happen.
Music cannot be suppressed.
I'm going to grab our links to kind of some spaces that we created for you to try it out. So if you want to join our Discord space to experiment and or the Slack space to experiment, we welcome you to do that right now while you can have some help. So I've put them in the chat. There is the ability to download the apps for both Discord and Slack, which you may not want to do initially. Using the web-based space might make the most sense right now. There's the Discord sandbox, the 1 minute setup for Discord, as well as kind of a Slack sandbox that you're all welcome to join. Any questions or anything?
So Rebecca, I know that you said that you made Slack like your main thing, or at least replicated everything on there so it could be mostly main.
Yeah.
For either of you, do you ever find though that they get technology overload? Did either of you ever try to balance it against too many other apps or websites or whatever?
I have experienced that, and not just at SUNY Oswego, but at a Polytech college where the students, you'd think they just like to be in dark rooms on the computer. That's the only reason that I didn't use Discord more. I prefer it to Blackboard. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say that, censor that, but in terms of being user friendly, but I just didn't want them to have that many logins and places they had to go. So I used it informally for that reason.
That's also why I really downplayed how much we used Blackboard. Slack is also a tool that some other design classes were using too, so it wasn't entirely unfamiliar to students. But it is actually why I'm contemplating moving to Google Chat, because some of the students were already in that space. It looks and feels very similar to both of these spaces in that you can do a lot of the same kinds of things. It does feel more like Slack in that it's a little more, what's the right word? Corporate, I guess, right? Might be the right word. So it does have kind of that level of kind of professionalism that's layered there, although it's informal. Because it mimics kind of how it's used in industry, and it feels like it's used in industry. For my students, it's good practice because that's a lot of design teams are using tools like this, and I don't think it matters which one they're using. So for me, it's an important thing that they're doing. But yeah, right, too many apps, too much screen time. I teach web design, so we're already on the screen a whole bunch anyways. right? And then, I'm teaching synchronously online. I teach studio classes. We're in class for 6 hours a week, which is more than most other classes, right? So yeah, we needed to do that and balance it with non-screen time things as well. So in part, having a place informal like that is a great, and using those huddles that I shared with you early on was a way where we could give updates to each other, but then be able to go do something not on the screen and then come back and share and connect. I also did a lot of breakout room stuff. And as you may have discovered in Zoom, when you have breakouts, there's no way to communicate with people in the breakout rooms unless you physically go there, right?
Right.
You join the room. And that to me was very frustrating because my students were working in small groups for long periods of time and they might have just a quick question. And that was too cumbersome. So they would ask it in Slack. And so that just became our way of communicating.
That's, I feel like all of those industries that are computer based are using Slack. And let's face it, those students won't graduate and be using Blackboard. My students may, because they may be nerdy English professors or creative writing professors, but we used Discord sometimes at Polytech College as a doorway to Slack to get them comfortable with what they'd be interacting in with their colleagues in the future. I think Slack is, if you're looking for something that the students are actually going to be using later, Slack is the one, because Discord is more it is more for hanging out.
And students did request a preference, sometimes for Discord in my classes too. But everyone's going to have different preferences, right? And so you need to pick one and stick with it.
Yes.
Right. And even if it's different than something else they're using in another class, right? We all work on projects and things where we work with different collaborators and the workflow is a bit different. It can be overload. So you need to build in time to learn those spaces, to develop those habits, and that you have to dedicate some class time to that if you really want it to take off.
So Rebecca, I just went to the Slack website you directed us to.
Yep.
And I've heard nothing about Slack that isn't good. So I would probably pick that one. I think that's the one that people know. But I was just curious within it. And again, I just signed on, so maybe simple question for you. But it says you can add channels.
Yep.
And so if I wanted to use this, set it up for group work.
Yep.
Example, how would we? I mean, that seems pretty doable. But how could we do it so that not all 30, 40 students see everyone's group chats? What if it can you set up?
You. Yeah, it's super easy. And I can save you a lot of time by just showing you how. So you can easily create new channels. And then one of the things that you can do is choose whether or not it's private. And if it's private, it's only visible to the people you specifically invite to that channel.
So I could set those up for the teams, yep, for example. And then, but they also, I heard you say they can set up their own if they wish.
Correct.
Good. Okay.
Yep. And that's something that you can lock down. I saw no reason to lock that down. If students wanted to just have another space to communicate and, because there was no social space otherwise for them, then, so be it. I didn't see it as a problem for my purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm teaching in person again in the spring, but I mean, just having a place that students can meet and go and talk, it's not as, easy. So I'm thinking even for an in-person class, this could be useful.
Yeah. And along those same lines, Josh, just so you kind of know what your other option is that's very similar, this is Google Chat. So it looks very similar. They have rooms, so you can create a room and invite whoever you want to it. So it automatically has your regular contacts in kind of your Google Suite. You can invite anyone from the institution easily. And you can make a room for each small group, for example, and you could make one that's for the whole class. And that doesn't require them to have any additional logins. So some of the same kinds of features.
Do you happen to know, I mean, is Slack popular amongst our students already?
It's not really a social thing, right? Like it's not a space where they would be social with each other. It's more of a workspace.
I asked because the only context I've heard of it being used is workplaces. So
Yeah.
That's why
Whereas some of them use the chat, I think, in both contexts.
yeah, that's why at the Polytech College we used Discord because they were all on there as gamers. So we used it to sort of lure them over to Slack, which is the more robust and useful professional tool.
So along the lines of the Google chat where you're trying to minimize the number of logins, I was considering using Zoom. Now they call it chat, which is bad because this also has a chat right here, but like the one where you can create channels. Have you ever compared and contrasted that against these?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. Anything else?
I guess my other question was, what's the limitations on the integrations for Slack for the free one?
I think it's 3 off the top of my head.
Okay.
I never really ran into any big issues because there wasn't a ton of things that I wanted to integrate. I definitely had Google Drive integrated. I definitely had Zoom integrated, and I had, might actually be 5. I think I might have had a few more. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for your time and attention. If you need more help, feel free to, I think, tap either of us. Would be happy to kind of consult on some of these things. There's a little bit of a learning curve to getting started, but like once you get started, it's really easy to implement.